जय जय राम जय जय राम जय जय राम कृष्ण हरि 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 जय जय राम जय जय राम जय जय राम। सियावर रामचंद्र की जय, राधावर कृष्णचंद्र की जय, सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। ओम नमो नारायण 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 केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव ओम नमो नारायण 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 माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव 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 ओम नमो नारायण ओम नमो नारायण ओम नमो नारायण ओम नमो नारायण गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद 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 ओम नमो नारायण 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 केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव हरि केशव माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव हरि माधव गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद हरि गोविंद ओम नमो नारायण 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 ओम नमो नारायण। श्री कृष्णचंद्र भगवान की जय, सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी, 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 वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी, श्याम सुंदर मदन मोहन वृंदावन बिहारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, वृंदावन बिहारी गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद 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 गिरिधारी, गोविंद गिरिधारी गोविंद गिरिधारी, ये वृंदावन बिहारी लाल की जय। श्री सद्गुरुनाथ महाराज की जय। भजमन राधे गोविंद, भजमन राधे गोविंद, भजमन राधे गोविंद, भजमन राधे गोविंद, भजमन राधे 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 गोविंद, भजमन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, भजमन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, भजमन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, भजमन गोवर्धन गिरिधारी, भजमन वृंदावन संचारी, भजमन वृंदावन संचारी, भजमन वृंदावन संचारी, भजमन वृंदावन संचारी, भजमन राधे 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 गोविंद, भजमन राधे 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 गोविंद, भजमन राधे 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 गोविंद,
Hari Om. Can you all hear me clearly? Awesome. Thank you. It's been a while. It's been about 6 weeks, I would say. And we were in the 12th chapter of self unfoldment. And we were halfway through it. But then I had to go to India because certain responsibility there had been postponed at least twice so far because of the pandemic. Now that the things are settling well, so went for a very important event. It was a prana pratishtha of two temple complexes. So that whole process of the temple and the pratishtha of the vigraha or the murti of the Devi Devatas, a total of 11 Devatas and the Navagraha, so 20 of them. It's an elaborate process. So spent about solid 20 plus days right there in that temple to make sure that it is efficiently done. And then spent about 10 days in Rishikesh and then flew out to be here. Someday I'll talk about the entire prana pratishtha process if the situation comes about. But presently, this three gunas and where do we stand, how do they impact, why do they impact, and what is this extent of its impact, that it impacts us individually as well as collectively. So that is what we will be looking into today. So let us join in the invocation and then we will open up for today's dialogue. ॐ सहनाववतु सहनौ भुनक्तु सह वीर्यङ्करवावहै तेजस्विनावधीतमस्तु मा विद्विषावहै ॐ शान्तिः 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 गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णुः गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुरेव परं ब्रह्म तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः तस्मै श्री गुरवे नमः. The chapter is titled Gunas. So effectively there are three of them: Sattvic, Rajasic and Tamasic. Now, these gunas have an influence on our everything, whatever we are living in and identified as. Our body is sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. Our mind is sattvic, rajasic, tamasic. Our intellect goes through the same. Pretty much everything that which is created has to go through these three layers, and they are interwoven. Yes, all three combining, so you could call it a Triveni, because all three are embedded in there. If you know how to channelize these three, then you become gunatita, beyond the impact and influence, knowing how to channelize it. If not, then we become taken over by these gunas and we dance to the tunes of these gunas. Guna means the quality. Guna also means in Sanskritam a rope, something with which you can be bound. So these gunas, now do we want to be bound by them, or do we want to be that who is riding, holding that rope and channelizing it? You're riding it or you're being ridden by it. I go back to my often repeated example is when you go surfing, not web surfing, but the actual surfing. The surfer's language is how many waves have you caught? Meaning, how many waves did you ride? Or were you caught by the wave? And once the wave catches you, it can slam you down to the floor of the water body, and it's pretty rough. And there are many movies that are made on that, and you can see a very close encounters of all of that. Nowadays, with the GoPro or whatever, you can actually see how bad that crash is. Similarly, for us, these three gunas, we have to learn how to ride it. In fact, in the old Gurukula system, in the ancient ways, the student was first taught how to regulate these three gunas and function. That was the first learning. It is in comparison to today's education system, where you are given all the fancy tools, James Bond like, and you're thrown on the road to fend for yourself without having the playbook of how to use these tools that you are being given. That is the education system. But whereas in the ancient ways, the first and foremost thing that was done was to equip the individual to the understanding wherein the equipment is well understood, well managed, and then the skill sets are introduced. Now, with a well managed instrument with the enhanced skill sets, you are ready to face life. But without that equipment and its complete understanding or balance of it, running into the world, it is almost like hilarious, because in my mind popped up an example for the recent uh, Prana Pratishtha, there were these Yuva Kendra members that had come to help and support, and they wanted to feel like the part of the entire thing. So, boys especially, they wanted to wear the dhoti. So, I taught them, I gave them, one of them, a live demo, and the rest of them to continue with that. So, you have to tie it really well. Otherwise, like you are just learning it and tying it and jumping to an active duty role. Either you can be doing the work, or you can be focusing, holding with your two hands the dhoti, lest it may rip off and there is a flag hoisted. There were many who were like carrying something, and suddenly the flag unfurls and they had to drop everything and try to hold. That is exactly our situation, wherein the mind, the body, our intellect is not fine-tuned, and we are in the midst of our activities, our actions, and suddenly the flag unfurls. It goes into a toss, and we are at the mercy of these gunas. We have absolutely no control. And it should have been obvious, but the most desperate thing at that point is we do not see ourselves away from that which is being tossed. We are so identified with the body, we are so identified with our mind, we are so identified with our intellect that we assume that it is not that my mind is sad, or my mind is riddled, or my mind is muddled. I am muddled. I am clumsy. No, it is not I who is being, it is the instrument which is going on a toss. Even that difference is not understood at that point of chaos. That is how deep, that is how serious is the problem. And how often does this happen? As unconsciously we live, that often it happens. Where you come across many of us who constantly say, oh, my life sucks. And I tell them very bluntly, because your life doesn't suck, you are the sucker. You are the one who is losing your wits over things because you have wrongly assigned. It is not that you are in the toss or turmoil, it is the mind that is in the turmoil, unless we separate ourselves. And in order to create that awareness and conscious effort to separate, this idea, this concept has to be understood clearly. How this sattvic, rajasic and tamasic thing functions. And if you have marked my words in the very beginning, I had said that in fact everything that has been created has these three layers of gunas. Why? The entire creation is an expression of this Maya Shakti, and the Maya Shakti is defined as Trigunatmika. So through these sattvic, rajasic, tamasic, the five panchakoshas, the five elements with which this entire creation is created, it is ridden with these three layers, which are the gunas. So you cannot avoid it. Food comes in these three aspects. Sukha comes in these three aspects. So one might wonder, Swamiji, I can understand sattvic sukha. What is rajasic and tamasic sukha? Bhagavad-Gita explains that. What kind of buddhi, what kind of mind, what kind of nishtha, what kind of tapas, all of these can be in these three layers. We cannot avoid it. There are many people who would say, my mind, how do I control it? The moment you want to be the controller of the mind will take you for a toss. Rather than trying to be the controller of the mind, identified with the mind, you have to disidentify from it and then balance it and rechannelize it. For which you have to know the levers very well, which are these sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic modes. Yes, tamas, wherever it envelopes, it has the influence where there's lethargy, there is fogginess of our intellect, lack of clarity. All these negative appearing tones can be seen, but tamas is an important ingredient, but it has to be in its own balanced equilibrium. Why? Without tamas, you and I cannot sleep. Sleep happens because of tamas. So tamas is not to be seen as a bad thing. The bad actually is that we have absolutely not been taught, or we have not learnt how to balance these three so that we make an efficient way of life. That inability to balance it is bad. Tamas as such is not bad, rajas as such is not bad, sattva as such is not bad. The one who learns how to balance it alone has the capacity to transcend it. And in realizing one's own true nature, one of the first steps is to be able to transcend these three gunas with like a clean cut. I think that much of introduction to jog our memory as to what we have learned so far in the earlier class, though I could have asked you to go back and revisit that because it's available. Now this sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic, it impacts the way individual thinks, behaves, and acts in the world at an individual level, and it also impacts at a collective level. So here comes the topic where it has been made like the black sheep of oppressiveness, which is the caste system. Even to this day, it's funny, the reason I'm smiling is the hasty Western readers, I won't call it this, the scheming Western readers have read the Indic or the Vedic knowledge, and they have put the translations so that it can fit into their own understanding. So they have cast the concept of Hindu religion in their own castes and said that this Varna system can be put into the mold. When I say caste earlier, it meant the mold. They put it into the mold and called it as the caste system, which they were familiar in their, whether it was Spain, whether it was French, whether it was British, in their systems, there was this system of hierarchy. So they said this might fit into it, and they casted the mold and they have defined it thus. And now they throw back that definition on us for us to feel offended by it. And now we have the responsibility to defend that which they have defined. Hope the confusion is clear. Give me a thumbs up if you have understood the confusion that I have just laid out. Good. Now let us remove those lenses and see what this Varna system means. And the basis of it, you get it in Bhagavad-Gita, several instances that Bhagavan refers to. One of them is Chaturvarnyam Maya Srishtam Guna Karma Vibhagashaha, where he clearly mentions that it is based on the Guna and Karma. Chaturvarnyam, 4 Varnas, have been created or established so that there is a seamless functioning of the entire society. Based on what? Based on Guna and Karma. Now the confusion comes where the practice is not Guna and Karma, it is Janmataha. Janmataha, by the birth. My ancestors were Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra. Therefore, whatever was they I become Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra accordingly. So people have a problem that if it is Guna and Karma, then why mold it according to the Janma? We'll come to that part of it at a later stage of our discussion. First, let us understand what does it mean when we say Guna Karma. If we understand this concept, you cannot blame your stars. You cannot blame your parents. You cannot blame God, Bhagavan. You cannot blame anything or anyone else other than, please stand in front of the mirror. You're looking at the cause. You're looking at the trigger. If you understand this concept. I am today purely because, or whatever I am today what I am purely because of those decisions, choices that I have made immediate past or remote past. When I say remote past, earlier lives. Immediate past, this very life. Isn't that true? That I apply to a college to be a lawyer. After 3.5 years, 4 years, last semester of my undergrad, suddenly I wake up and I am declared a doctor. Nuh-uh. It doesn't happen that way. Wish, right? Suddenly that you turn out to be something else. No, it doesn't happen that way. Whatever you have invested, whatever choices that you have made, those choices lead you to be exactly where you are. Now, the choices that we are making at all levels, is it sattvic, is it rajasic, or is it tamasic? Guna. Based on that, there is a conviction. Based on that conviction, there is an action, and that action expresses. Action is a louder form of outward expression of the thought or the conviction that we hold. So guna, expressing as action, defines it. Now those of us, as I've already said, that we have definitely all three gunas embedded, enmeshed. But for that individual who has consciously maintained their mind, their internal equipment, their choices, their decisions, their actions, at say 70% or 60% sattva, there is 20% or 25% of rajas and 15% of tamas. Such a guna classification, roughly about, they said they are the Brahmana. Kshatriya are those where there is a predominance of rajas and sattva and less of tamas. So maybe about 40% of sattva, 40% of rajoguna, and 20% of tamoguna. Because kshatriya is to go out there, put their lives at stake and defend, whether it is a nation, whether it is a population, whether it is enforcement of law and decency, whatever it be, whether you are in armed forces, police forces, or whatever be the forces, that is the kshatriya. Then comes the business community. Now in business community, you require there is selfishness, right? You are doing a business, it's not a charity. So when you are trying to be a businessman, there is a higher percentage of rajoguna, a lesser percentage of the sattva guna. So it would be about say 50% of rajoguna, 30%, because even in those decisions of their self-centered businesses that they want to aim for profits and grow their businesses, there is dharma involved. Dharma meaning that which keeps the balance and to do things in a right order, whether it is morally, ethically, legally, there has that dharma to be held as a priority. So dharmic way of doing business. So there is sattva involved, because dharmic way of life, there is sattvic guna that has to be understood. And of course they have to sleep and rest. So there will be about 20%, 15-20% of the tamoguna. Now when you come to the last one, the Shudra, I would say the Rajoguna is high, Tamoguna is also high, Sattva may be very, very nominal. Why Rajoguna is high? Because most of the Shudra field of work is pure skill sets. And when I say they are pure skill sets, we have seen through the pandemic that when you talk about the essential services, these essential services are the ones that which are so essential, without which the society will come to a standstill. So they are an integral part of the entire system, and they are based on the skill sets, a particular kind of skill set. And whether it is a mason, whether it is a carpenter, whether it is those who work in the local governance, where they have to clear out all the trash, where they have to maintain the streets clean, whether they have to be the foot soldiers, where they have to work on a field to till the land, plow the land, and do the hard work. There are skill sets. Now, can you imagine a society without these skill sets? The society will not run. It will come to a standstill. So every society first and foremost, cannot do away without these 4 layers of functionality. So Puja Gurudev, I have heard him say it many times. He says that the Brahmana is the thinker. So he used to always take the example of a corporate world. So in a corporate world, you have the think tank. Now, what does a think tank do? Think. What do you mean by thinking? They envision, they plan, they scope out for the entire organization, for the entire system. They are the ones who are envisioning to be ahead of the curve, to think 15 years down the lane, so that the entire organization benefits from this futuristic thinking, planning, bringing in ideas, making the ideas as concepts, those concepts as understandables, those understandables into doables. All this is a package of these think tank thinkers. Then comes, once the plan of action is there, the thinkers have thought, they have given a plan of execution. Then comes the people that have to make sure that this whole structure, this organization, has a secure environment for this entire endeavor to yield a result. These are the Kshatriyas, where there has to be not just a physical facility and its security, the people and its security, the intellectual property and its security, the networking and its security, and all these financial securities. So to maintain security at several levels, that is the job of the Kshatriya. Now these thinkers have thought and there have been doables given. There should be somebody that can execute. So there are these business executives. Now what are their job? To translate that which has been thought through and been given as a doable, to put it down and execute it in a operating system, in a platform. Even the computer, even the cell phone works in the same pattern. You download an app and it has to be executable. If there is a bug, it cannot be executed. So they have to debug the whole thing and make sure that seamlessly these things can be executed. They are the executives who bring in business and produce that result so that the business can expand. Now, once the executables have been modeled, there is a blueprint that has been created. Now, what does this blueprint have to then get into the next shape? It has to go through the production and it has to go through the assembly line. Now, you need huge chunks of workforce, where the workforce is skilled, wherein if you say there is a car part and this fellow is skilled at the right side of the assembly line, you put him on the left side, he'll get confused. Supposing you go to a restaurant, right? The waiter comes and you give an order. First thing they ask, what do you want to drink? And as a teetotaler, they see you go there and you say, if you change the instruction, okay, the skill set you're not matching, there'll be a white space of noise where your instruction has not reached there. If you say, I want a glass of water without ice, maybe a piece or two of lemon, please. You'll say, what? Because it does not come in their order of instruction. You go to Starbucks and you say, there is a whole mantra that you have to chant to get your order delivered. Tall, non-fat, double, mocha, extra hot, without whipped cream, with 2 raw sugars, please. If you change the sequence, the poor fellow cannot deliver what you are expecting. So the skill set is developed very, very micro focused on the details. And they're very good at those details. So you need a workforce which has learned the skill set and learned the skill set with details, and those details are tested, and then they come back to the Vaishya where they have to now market it. They have to now sell it. They have to now make sure that this product is reaching. Now, even here, there is this corporate espionage. Have you heard of it? Where your secret, your blueprints, your ways of skills, your ways of nuances can be stolen, reverse engineered. Now, this is where the Kshatriya comes into picture, where they have to protect that interest. Tell me a system where this Brahmana, Kshatriya, Vaishya, Shudra does not get applicable. Countries, systems, organizations, corporates, they all function in the same system. Now, one might argue, yes, it is all well, beautifully put, nice example, but there is no restriction of an individual being a thinker or a think tank or an executioner or assembly line skill set worker based on their birth, based on what lineage that they function in. Now, if you look at it, in that family where there is someone who is involved and engaged in heavy politics as a politician, what are the children becoming? Mostly, they end up being into the field of politics. Should I give example? The whole family of Kennedy, senior Bush, junior Bush, I can go on. Am I getting across? If my parents were into armed forces, all likelihood that I, as a child with that environment, I would also go into that. If my parents have been doctors, highly likely that I would want to be in that. Or in a first state, first world experience, it may be a little skewed because our existence is not threatened. Our very living is not threatened. You have a lot of choices and ample of opportunity and ample of scope. So highly likely that if you have seen that both of your parents are doctors and you have that ample opportunity, you would say, nah, my parents have seen how they have struggled. Let me enjoy what they have struggled on for. But if your very existence is at stake and you have to survive, you have to create your own foothold to create your niche, you're highly likely that you would also end up there. Now at this point, let me bring in Janma also. What does Janma mean? Based on what I have done in this life, I have acquired Papa Punya. I have acquired my own blueprint for my next life. Next life wherein this mindset of mine, this kind of a texture of mine has to find a correct match for its further growth. Not using that choice, we may fall trap and we may go down as well. But the opportunity for that mind to further explore and grow, that kind of environment is required. So if in this life I have made choices of acquiring several skill sets and I have become very, very accomplished in it, the mind has been trained, the mind has been supplied with these kinds of choices. The texture of it is decided, whether it is a sattvic texture or a rajasic texture or a tamasic texture. Now this mind requires that kind of a matching environment of parents, siblings, nation, neighborhood, education system, politics, economics, where this kind of individuality will find the opportunity to explore and grow. So we are plugged into the next life, into that very system where this mind has designed itself to reach. Meaning you and I, consciously or unconsciously, whatever decisions I have made becomes the key. But having said that, once you are born, you're not entitled to it unless until you match and grow from there on. If not, there is quite a slip between the cup and the lip. Have you ever tried drinking a cup of coffee while you're driving? It's actually easy if you are driving to drink a cup of coffee. Try drinking that cup of coffee when someone else is driving. You don't know when that fellow will be applying a brake, and you are taking the hot sip from that cup and suddenly brake. Instead of just a sip going, there's a gulp that goes down and it just burns through. Have you had such experiences? So the opportunity that you have in this life is pretty much designed by us in our earlier choices of the past lives. But having been born there, do I do justice to where I have been born with the opportunities that I have? Now, many I see that we have the opportunity. We have the opportunity for the highest, moksha, not just these vyavaharik things, but moksha itself. But moksha expects us to train this mind. Nobody is stopping us. Okay. The path is given, the methods are given. You have to say, wake up early, take a shower, sit down, do your puja, japa, dhyana, do your shastra vichara, and then get into your actions. Ask any sincere seeker, how many times did they fail at it before coming to a discipline where it has become their reflex nature to do so. But because you have failed giving up, there are quite a few. Therefore, Bhagavan says, Kaschin mam vetti tatvatah. Manushyanam sahasreshu. Of the millions that we are, why don't we put that effort? Somewhere tamas takes over. Somewhere rajas takes over. Who doesn't like to sleep? Not in my class, because I make it challenging for them to sleep. Because I keep yelling in between. Early morning when you have to wake up, that is the best time, you know. The bed is warm. You have warmed it yourself. The quilt is warm. And the outside environment is cold enough. So you snuggle in, you pull it up again, and this damn alarm, and shut it out and continue for 5 more minutes only to realize that you have slept for another extra hour and a half. Whereas a disciplined mind, which has trained itself, will jump out of the bed and get to the task. But there we have to work on our own patterns: sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic. And there is no jumping directly. A tamasic mind has to be disciplined through rajas, and a rajasic mind has to be disciplined through sattva. If you try applying a sattvic technique directly on tamas, it is like telling a PhD syllabus to a kindergartner. It will fly out. Like, nothing will enter, nothing will penetrate. Therefore, even how Gurudev has designed this whole environment of Chinmaya Mission platform, this is Balakeshu cha samskara. For the children, put the samskara in, the right mold in. Vicharo yuvakeshu cha, for the youth, because they start questioning why for everything and why not for everything. So put the vichara, the thinking system, to think through. Therefore, what is the definition of Yuva Kendra? Harnessing youth potential through dynamic spirituality, wherein a platform of action is given, rajas is given. And then slowly, when your mind is tapering off of the itch of this rajas, and it starts evaluating, thinking, reprocessing, it says, okay, I've done this enough. Can I step to a better level than this? Can I channelize it in a different way? And then sattva takes priority. Even in our day-to-day life, to be able to, today we are talking about mindful living. Mindful living is a sattvic way of life in every single choice. So if you can make a conscious attempt at your own life, how much amount of my time am I spending with sattvic choices? Food, what kind of sattvic choices? Discipline, what kind of sattvic choices? Thinking, what kind of sattvic choices? Decision making, what kind of choices? So if you evaluate, first to try to evaluate how much percentage of my life is sattvic, how much of it is rajasic, and how much of it is tamasic, we would know exactly where we are. Then we have to come to the reality that this is where I am. Now let me work my way through from where I am to where I should be. In that process, once you slowly pave your path and reach to the heights of sattva, there is nobody that would stop you in that expertise of being a sattvic person. That a Ratnakara, who was a wayside bandit, a robber, becomes the Adi Kavi, Kavi Valmiki. Born in a fisher family, fishing folk family, he becomes Veda Vyasa. You and I have that opportunity, provided we take a serious note of harnessing this sattvic, rajasic, and tamasic force that we have and channelizing it properly. To get out of tamas, we need the mind to be enticed with some kind of result oriented. That is the rajas. Once that result oriented mind has been whipped and trained and disciplined, then it has to evolve if it is rightly applied to come to a point wherein I have done enough of this rut. Is there a better way of life? Then sattva becomes the option. So, how much of our life are we ready to discipline, dedicate, and devote ourselves? Now, when I say discipline, every discipline will have a pain point that I am able to sustain myself by. Supposing you go exercising, there is a burn that you feel in your muscles. You can actually build something worthwhile only if you cross that threshold. Just because you feel a little challenged there, because it is throwing you out of your comfort and you give up, then that discipline is not established properly. So whenever a discipline is being talked about, how much pain am I able to suffer through happily? There is going to be a pain. There is no gain without that pain. In fact, a gain is only when you cross that threshold of pain. Am I ready for it to commit? At a physical level, at a level of habits, at a level of thinking, at a level of emotions, at a level of clarity and ideals. Am I ready to push myself beyond that limit? Now, why is it that difficult? So Bhagavan says, as an example, the veils covering the self. He says the tamasic mind, the veil is almost like, the example given is the individual being still in the womb as a fetus. Now, tamasic is such kind of a veil wherein how much ever you want to rush, you cannot get out of the tamasic state unless you discipline it to that mature level for it to get out of that tamas. Now, the fetus, it cannot, I am in a rush, I need to get out. Mom, let me jump out. No, it has to go through the gestation period of those 38 to 40 weeks, and that is when the child can be born. The tamas, is like that. It takes its time to get out of it. Rajasic desires, they are like the settled dust on a mirror. Supposing you have not had the cleaning done and the mirror keeps accumulating dust, and suddenly your parents said, son, you have an apartment there and we have this wedding coming in that city, we are going to visit and we thought we would anyway stay with you. And like, when are you arriving? Tomorrow afternoon, so come pick. So whole night what are you doing busy? Probably being in this particular age group, you don't have a luxurious home where you move the entire stuff into another room and lock it up, which is what happens in most of the big houses. So you have to put your effort, those little space that you have, to put everything back in its place, to clean the toilet, to clean the shower, to clean the sink, to clean the kitchen area. And when you go to that mirror, the dust that has formed and all the yucky thing that has fallen on it, on the top of which again the dust has settled, you try throwing some water on it and try to wipe it with, no, it's not going to work. Today you have Windex. Now I'm not talking of the big fat Greek wedding where everything is Windex as a solution. You have Windex and then you wipe it off. In the ancient days, that system was, to remove this dust, you have to apply a little dust. So the best was the fine powder of vibhuti. You mix it in water and you apply it on the mirror and allow it to semi-dry, and then take a paper and then wipe it off. This drying dust gathers the dust which is already settled in and peels it off effortlessly. So there is a nonetheless an effort required, but an intelligent effort, not just a brute discipline, that is, but an intelligent effort as a solution is required. Now the sattvic desire, it is like the smoke covering the fire. There you require a lot of precision. You've seen, at least I have grown up in an environment where the kitchen had three stones and firewood was supplied to cook. Now firewood sometimes doesn't burn because of lack of air supply, so they have a long pipe and you need to know how to blow it. The ancient people knew it. If you hold it close to your mouth and try blowing, you will only be generating more of smoke. Why? Okay. Because you are directly supplying your exhausted air, which is carbon dioxide. When you throw carbon dioxide into a live fire where oxygen is removed and carbon dioxide is given, it churns out more of carbon monoxide. That is the smoke. So what did they do? That little pipe, they held it a little distance and blow into it. Now that creates a system wherein the atmospheric oxygen is pulled in and that is circulated deep into the firewood. The embers start glowing and suddenly catch fire. And what happens to the smoke when the fire is lit? It vanishes. So constant supply of that oxygen, that life force is required in the sattvic stature to remain in that sattva. So my request to all of you as a practical sense of application, please look at it, our own lives. Consciously note down what time phase do you feel that you are more available and prone to the sattvic aspects, sattvic choices. What time you are, you know, rolling into rajas, and what time you get into the tamasic modes. And how does one repair this? First, to organize it properly, then to discipline it, then whichever is predominant, to have a pathway designed to grow from tamas to rajas to sattva. Yes, being in sattva and the glory of it is looks fine, but you cannot do away with the hard work without the hard work of crossing the rajasic phase. You may try to enact being sattva, being in sattva, but it soon falls apart. It's okay wherever you are. It may be higher amount of tamas, but be true to yourself. This is where I am. This is the pathway, and this is how I will swim my own currents that I have to grow out of. But that conscious evaluation is required. To help you with understanding this better, take Puja Gurudev's Bhagavad-Gita. I'm not spoon feeding you the entire thing. I'm giving you the pointers, and I'm giving you the resource house where you can go and find more detail. 16th and 17th chapter of Bhagavad-Gita give a rough study of it. There is a detailed account of how this sattva, rajas, tamas can be understood in nuances, and that will guide you better. So you have Puja Gurudev's Bhagavad Gita on Kindle, on iBooks, U-books, her books, he books, she books, in all the digital formats. And if you're not a digital kind of a person, then you can avail the book from our Chinmay publications and read through the 16th and 17th chapter. And if you are buying at it, I would even suggest, instead of going for the big Holy Gita book, go for the individual chapters. It has the word meanings, it has introduction, it has a little more effort put in for our easy understanding. So take that and read through it, and it will definitely help you. If you have any questions based out of it, you can as well ask me all of that next week. And your investment of reading through and coming back in its application and how to is where I am expecting a lot of questions. So please read through Bhagavad Gita 16th and 17th chapter. Very small chapters they are. And then come back next week with your questions. By Thursday, max Friday, please post your questions. And I'll look forward for your questions. Nice to be back. Nice to see all of you. And we'll continue next week. Same time, same place. Om Shant Shant Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Take care, everyone.